On a recent drive across the country, I swung into Helena, Montana. We stopped for a beer, some gear for the trip, and hung out at a local park. And I'll be back this year to fish the mighty Missouri, one of the great rivers out west. In this episode, you're going to hear about a person who sold her business to go all in on fly fishing and where she is focusing her efforts this year. If you're new to fly fishing, then this episode is going to give you some tools and resources to let you know where to start the right way. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. Hey, I'm Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a little kid. I grew up around a little fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. I've also interviewed more of the greatest men and women fly anglers than just about anyone out there. Shalon Hastings, fly fishing instructor, guide, and all-around badass fly angler, is going to take us into the Big Mo. You're going to hear about some of the first things she does with a new student and some things you can take away on this if you're just getting started. And she's going to talk about why entomology is something you should be learning about. It's going to help your learning curve, and why Naughty Nights is something you might want to check out if you're just getting started and out in the area. Plus, she's going to clear the air about women fly fishing in bikinis, all this stuff. We're going to talk about it, and she might have a little different take than you were thinking. We're heading back to the Big Missouri, the Big Mo this year. Let's find out how to do it the right way. Here we go. Shalon Hastings at Shalon Hastings on Instagram. How you doing, Shalon?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Dave. How about yourself?
Doing great. It's going to be a great conversation today. We're going to have, I think, what we're going to probably call an intro to fly fishing episode a little bit here today. And I like to do these every once in a while because we always have new listeners coming in, and we've been doing a lot of events, so we always get new people. So this is going to be awesome to tee this up. And I think you focus on top of that on women in fly fishing. So we're going to touch base there. And also Helena, visit Helena. We've been doing some work with them this year. We're we're for sure doing a trip to the Missouri River this next year. So that's going to be exciting to put all this together and get some people out there. But before we jump into it, maybe take us back. I like to go back to the start on fly fishing. How did you first get into all this?
Yeah. So, of course, as with many, my dad, when I was in middle school, I was like, oh, that looks interesting. And so I asked him if he would teach me how to cast. And I distinctly remember us standing in the yard, and I don't remember much about the instruction itself, but after we had a brief, who knows how long it was, probably 30 minutes, if that, I thought I knew everything. So
Yeah.
yeah. And admittedly, at that time, I just knew, was aware of an elk hair caddis and a hopper pattern, and maybe was drawn to a mayfly because they're pretty. But I just knew, your dry fly forms of fishing. And it wasn't until like 2014, 2015. So fast forward about 30 years. And I had the opportunity to fish the Missouri with a friend who was a guide out there. And he schooled me on nymphing. And so it was revolutionary for me.
Yeah. So you had some action out there nymphing?
Yes. My friend, he's very fishy. The nymphing education was, let's see here, it was a challenge. And that's what drew me to the thoughts of instructing, was just that it was a hard education to learn at the time.
Yeah, that's cool. And was this on the Missouri? Were you guys floating the Missouri?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like that's what you see most of the people out there. Do you see a lot of people in boats, not as much off the bank?
A lot of boats. There are a few, especially when the river gets lower, you see an increase of those bank anglers, or, the waders, because they can get further out there. But when it's a bit higher, there's fewer out there.
Gotcha. So going back to your dad, so he didn't come up and from an early age say, "Hey, I'm fly fishing. I want you to fly fish," and force you into it. You had to ask him.
Unfortunately, yeah, and and I think, who knows? I'm sure he was happy to do it. In fact, he's still here with me, of course. And we get out, as adults.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. Once I started guiding and had a boat of my own, Well, let's back up. Right after he taught me how to do the basic cast, he actually put all of his gear away to pursue mountain biking. At
Oh,
that
wow.
time, yeah, this was late 80s. Mountain biking was, kind of a new deal. And here in Helena, we have a significant amount of trails. And he just went full force into that. And fortunately, he didn't get rid of his gear, he just put it away.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And so, yeah. And so
Still
that
doing
was,
it.
yeah. So I was on my own from there, to
Yep.
go out and
Figure it
find.
out, which is fun.
Yeah. It was minimal.
Yeah, I hear you. I want to hear more about that, process of how you go from that to, teaching and, kind of everything you have going with, some of the stuff you're working on now, including, I think, the Last Chance Fly Gals. Is that still a big part of what you have going right now?
It is. It's coming back around. And so if you want me to delve into it, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, well, let's before we jump there, I'm just curious because I always think about this again, getting started. We're talking about
Yeah.
101 fly fishing, and people of all ages starting fly fishing. I kind of struggle with that a little bit. With my kids, they're 10 and 12. I've never
Oh,
really
sure.
forced the fly fishing on them, but they're not totally into it, but they do like
Hmm.
outdoors. So we kind of did a deer hunting trip this weekend, and on the ride out, we were floating the river. My older daughter, she was on the front of the combing deck on the drift boat and just, wrote a story about it when they got home. So I feel like we're
Oh,
planting the seed, even though they're not like
yes.
expert fly anglers. Do you feel like that's the best way to do it? Take it easy?
I think so. Yeah. Kids, they're just exploring things. And yeah, I've got a nephew who, he's expressed interest in fishing and I've taken him out a couple of times, but he's got so many other things to try that it's like, I really want him out there, but he's not quite there at my level of excitement about it. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to,
Right.
yeah, force him into it and then make him resentful.
Yeah.
And so hopefully he comes around. And I would love for my niece to get out too, but that's looking less and less like a thing, at least right now.
Yeah. I
So,
gotcha. Nice.
yeah.
Well, yeah. Why don't you take us into some of the stuff you have going? Because you started out, I know, you had a couple of restaurants in the Helena area, and it sounds like you sold those and jumped full into the fly fishing. Is that how the transition looked?
Yeah. So, yeah, up until 2019, I owned a taco shop and separately a coffee shop. And I think it was in latter part of 2018 is when I got my guide license. And so I was doing all three, running the restaurants and trying to do a little bit of guiding. And the reason I even became a guide was I wanted to instruct fly fishing. And here in Montana, if you do anything with a fly or a hook, you have to be a guide if you're going to take compensation for that work. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'll become a guide. And so then, yeah, in 2019, I was done. I was done with the restaurants, and so I sold one in June and one in August, and it was a huge, just like weight off of my shoulders when that happened, so that I could pursue guiding full time. But then, of course, COVID was the following year,
Oh, yeah.
and it was just up in the air as to what the season would look like, and all of the trips that I had been booked by outfitters to work, at least that early spring, all got canceled, and that scared
Right.
me. And so I kept a server position that I had at a fine dining establishment here in Helena for the summer, and just kind of limped through COVID and had a few gigs, but just couldn't fully commit. And then in the winter of 2021, January, I had the opportunity to start with On Water app. It was a brand new startup at the time. I was the second person to be hired, and I was just going to work for the winter to get through doing some mapping and whatnot. And a couple months in, they asked me if I would consider being the director of operations, and I couldn't turn down that opportunity.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I did that for 2 years and left On Water this last January to again finally pursue guiding full time. So
Wow. So that's it. So now
yeah.
you're fully all fly fishing all the time.
Well, I wish to, and because it's taken me a roundabout way to being a guide on the Missouri, in essence, I just say the low man on the totem pole.
Right.
Yeah, because all, my fellow guides that I kind of were entering in at 2020, they've, really got themselves settled in and are, regularly hired by the outfitters. I'm still a little bit on the edges there.
Yep.
And so I work part-time at the state. Got a great position that allows me to come and go. And I
Oh,
come in
cool.
and work on projects. And yeah, and they're willing to work around my guide schedule.
Amazing. Amazing.
It
So that's it.
is. I'm blessed. Yes.
Yeah. And what is it about the Missouri? Maybe describe that a little bit. You've been, I mean, is that, I know there's a lot of water, but what do you love about fishing that river? It's big, right?
Oh my gosh, it is big, and that's been one of the awesome challenges for me is, figuring out how you fish it. It's flat, it's a tailwater, and so it's hard to see those definitions that you're looking for. And I'm still learning, and I think that that's what draws me to fly fishing in general and the Missouri itself is that continual learning journey that happens every single day. There's something new to learn. And I'm born and raised here in Montana, not necessarily here in Helena, but have spent my high school and latter part of my years here. And the Missouri River just gets inside you. Like when I cross, there's a particular spot on the interstate when you're coming around, you've passed Wolf Creek, and you're coming up and over the top, and it's the first time you see the Missouri coming from Helena. There's a really nice straightaway there that you see, and every time I see that, it's inside me. I take a deep breath and just take it in, and am appreciative of the fact that I get to spend a lot of my days on that water and showing people that water. It's an incredible fishery. Have you been on it, Dave?
No, I mean, well, we
Okay.
drove through this last, we did a trip out to the Wisconsin, the driftless
Oh,
for
yes.
kind of the driftless school that we did, which was concurrent with the same time as the Stillwater school, which you were on with Phil Roy. But it was cool because we stopped in Helena. We went down to the Lewis and Clark Brewing. We spent some time in Helena, stopped at a park, and just to kind of get a feel for it.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't do any fishing. We just kind of popped through, and but we will be, like I said, we're going to be coming back. So I'm excited to check out the river for sure.
It's yeah. And all of us, we all have our home rivers and we all think that they're the number one.
Yeah,
But I get it. But yeah, the Missouri, it's a pretty special place.
yeah, that's it. Well, let's just take it into the kind of the 101, fly fishing. So somebody, you have a new client or somebody on the boat and is it all boat? Is that the first start? Is it boat? And then what are your first steps if somebody's new to it? How do you get them going?
Yeah. And so in addition to the boat, but one of my specialties, if you will, is I like to do beginning fly fishing with a walk wade day on the Little Blackfoot.
Okay.
Or any of our other smaller streams. We've got a couple of creeks that run around or near Helena. We've got the Little Prickly Pear and the Prickly Pear. And those are great. I really enjoy doing walk weight instruction for those that want to be able to learn fly fishing to get out on their own. A drift boat trip on the Missouri, it's
Right.
a
It's
big
a lot.
expenditure. Yes. And a lot of the people that book me for instruction are looking to get out on their own eventually. And so, in fact, I've been doing some women's clinics, some weekend clinics on the Missouri. And so we learn your knots. Actually, we start with a bug seine so they see, just what the fish are eating. And then we go back to the fly shop and we match those flies to what they saw. And then we roll into knots and we talk, what's a fly line and what's the leader and what do you do with tippet? Why do you need tippet? And how do you attach those things? And then we do some casting and a couple other shops in Craig we'll visit just so that, and this is specifically for women, just so that they're comfortable in walking into a fly shop and, knowing what they're looking at, or at least starting that education of, what to expect in there. And then the following day, we rig our rods and we learn drifting, casting and drifting on the water. But yeah, so it is different than if you were to get in my boat. If you get in my
Right.
boat, typically it's like, okay, you guys, this is how you fish from a boat. And we see a lot of never before anglers. They've never held a fly rod before. They're in Montana.
You get that in your boat? Do you get
Yeah.
that in your, yeah. So you have clients in the boat
Yeah.
that are brand new. You're teaching them to
Brand
cast
new.
out of the boat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
With a double
Which
dip
is not
rig.
easy, which is not as easy as doing it off the bank.
No, it's not. And then, yeah, exactly. The whole boat scenario is a thing. Where do you stand? How do you get
Right.
in and out of the boat?
Yeah.
And
How do you not fall in the river when the boat moves? Although those
exactly.
boats you guys are using, are you using Adipose? They're pretty stable, right? Those skiffs.
Adipose is a huge boat on the Missouri. They are
Yeah.
locally made here in Helena. I row a clacka.
Oh, Clacka. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Same thing.
yeah,
Similar deal. Yep.
yeah, exactly. The cutout braces that
Yeah.
you stand in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a challenge, and I remember what it was like distinctly when I was going out with my friend for the first probably 30 times. I mean, it was still so intimidating. And to your point, yeah, casting from a boat, being concerned about hooking your fellow angler or your guide.
Right.
And a lot of people, they want to just do a little, and I say, don't give me any half-ass sets here. I need a full set. Commit to it. No half-assing in this boat. And then they're intimidated. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what to expect because, of course, the first sets that you ask them to do, it's typically grass. It's usually not a fish, right? And so then they're like, oh, I messed up. And you're like, no, no, no. You did great. You give me that full set, you're in an upcast, and then put it back out there. And it's those weak sets that are the ones that can hook people in the boat,
Oh,
mess up
yeah.
your rig. Yeah,
Yep.
it's a thing.
Right. So so you're saying they hook a piece of grass or whatever, do the hard set. That's a good way to show them how to do the set on a fish.
Yeah, exactly. And we want them setting regardless. I'm like, a take is going to look like a grasp, that you're touching bottom, and it could be a fish, and you've got to set every time. And we want that rig out of whatever it's mired in and drifting again. And you come up into an upcast and put it back out there. And they have a hard time. And so it's, yeah, when a person gets into my boat, it's immediately, this is how you cast. And you've got two flies, you've got this weight, bobber. There's a lot going
There
on.
is a lot going on.
Yeah. And then casting and setting is pretty much what we're talking about. And I try to, and then I'll, have them fight a fish, if you will. I'm the fish. And I just grab their line and.
Right. So you do all that before you're really out on the water.
Yeah. In fact, what we'll do is we'll get in my boat, and a lot of us guides like to, be on the water and, give them that opportunity to fling that rig out there and see it drifting and pointing out, what they should be watching as they're watching. They should be watching the bobber, of course. And so we launch, we just scoot over a little bit, and we're in the boat. So it gives them a more realistic, experience.
Yeah. So you have time. So you're not rushing. That's probably maybe the worst thing I think about you're in the boat and all of a sudden, you're rushing like, oh man, I got to beat the other boat. Right. Do you ever feel like that? That's the way it is out there.
Dave, that's funny. Yes. Initially I get that, like, especially in the parking lot.
I know. I hate that. I mean, I did that exact same thing. We were just on the Deschutes, and it's just a habit of mine, partly comes from my dad, but we had this boat that was putting in at the same time. And I was like, oh man, I know these guys. I know where they're going. I know they're going to be going for the same spot. And it just was this whole pressure. And I don't know why I do that, but I think everybody kind of has that.
Yeah. And I think it's just human, right?
Yeah.
We want to be the first. And
Yeah.
I've had to rein myself in and just be like, okay, Shalon, just slow down. This is their day. We're going to take our time. And then on the Missouri, there's so much to fish, and there's a lot of fish. And so it's not necessarily like I get your concern about, on some rivers, there are the spots that you want to get to before anyone else. And we do have the benefit of not having that, unless you're looking for dry fly. If you're looking for, pods of fish rising, there is that. But my clients are not going to be dry fly fishing.
Okay. Yeah. So for the most part, you're getting them going, like you said, 101, you're maybe starting with nymphs. Is that kind of the first step?
Yeah. And now for guiding, it's the most effective way of catching a fish on the Missouri, at least. Because what happens for dry fly fishing, you've got to have a good, on the Missouri for dry flies, you've got to have a good 40, 60-foot cast.
Oh,
And
wow.
new anglers don't.
And that's just because they're spooky?
Yes, the high season, then latter part of June, July. The fish I've seen a lot, lots of boats, lots of anglers, lots of casts, lots of flies. And
Gotcha.
so,
What is
yeah.
it like right now? We're kind of in October, November period. What's it like right now?
Yeah. So it's definitely quieter because we've had archery season open. We just had pheasant open last weekend. And so that draws a few people off the river. And this year, like we've had a really warm fall. It's still like yesterday, we were still at 70 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so looking at some photos from a couple of years ago, it was snowing. And I remember having a killer dry fly day because the BWOs were hatching and they haven't yet really gone off because it's been so warm. And so you never know, but things slow down on the Missouri, people wise, but the fishing is getting good again because they're feeding again. There's going to be a hatch someday. So
Yeah. Right. Just waiting.
yeah.
What is the on, maybe more specifically women you talked about, maybe we can just take this into more women in fly fishing. We've had this conversation a little bit, on the podcast, but how do you get, new women comfortable going into the fly shop? Because it seems like that's always kind of, it can be, I don't know what the word is for it, just a little strange, right? Because sometimes.
It's strange, it's intimidating.
Yeah,
Like
intimidating.
and especially so new anglers, but I think especially women for fly fishing. Well, it's male dominated right now, and it still is, even given some of the initiatives to try to change that. And so that just puts a little stress on us. I admittedly, I like to make fun of ourselves, all of us, and sorry if I offend anyone, but all of us bros out there.
Right.
And it's just like, ladies, I mean, it's fishing at the end of the day, whether it's conventional angling or fly angling, we're looking for that tug and being outside and just easing them in. And I think one aspect that really helps is just having women out there that are instructing and are guiding.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Right.
just, yeah, so I do women specific clinics just for that reason, so they have a space to be comfortable in. And I've seen some comments from men like, well, why do you girls have women only? And then you freak out
Oh,
when we
wow.
do, if we were to say it's a men
Right.
only. And it's like,
Sure.
okay, well, if you want to be, it's just like, if you want to be around women who want to talk about female issues such as having your period on the river,
Right.
or how do you go to the
Right.
bathroom, because we do have
Yep.
different means of having to go to the
Definitely.
bathroom, then yeah, you come talk to me. We'll have a discussion about that. But
That's totally true. No, I hear this is great because, Megan, who is, my, partner, and we're, have kids and everything. That was a thing that came up because this hunting, we have this deer hunting thing we do. And we have this guys, it's been a guys trip for a while. And I was like, well, how about we do this thing to, the guys and bring the girls together? And she's like, well, all that same stuff you said. I kind of like, she wanted to have her own space
yeah,
so she can
yes,
be in her own moment and not have to worry about where she's going pee or just getting in the you know what I mean, that visceral thing. And I think that's what it is hard to get right, because guys can be a little bit just different. It feels like that's the thing you're talking about. You set a stage for people to feel comfortable.
yes, yes, and yeah, women can be more themselves amongst other women and not be concerned about what the men would think if we were to start talking about some of those topics. And it still happens, we'll get mansplained. Like
Oh, right.
yeah,
I know.
I took a couple of gals into a fly shop, and it was ironic that just earlier in that day, one of the gals was not familiar with the term mansplaining.
Right.
And so then we went into this fly shop and I got mansplained.
Oh, God.
And the other gal that knew mansplaining, she said later, she's like, I almost was just said out loud, Barbara, this is what mansplaining is right here.
Right.
And it can be so uncomfortable to be mansplained. And we just,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Right. Which is just basically maybe just clarify what that is
sure.
exactly.
Yeah. It's when a gal, a woman who knows what she's doing is then being told by a man what to do. So,
Right.
I mean,
Like basic stuff, like kind of basic stuff. That
yeah,
or
yeah.
they're thinking because you're a woman, you don't know
You
anything,
don't know. Exactly.
and yeah, you need to know all
So
the
they,
basics.
yeah, they take over the conversation or,
Yeah.
yeah, treat you like you don't know what you know.
What would be your recommendation for people listening, guys listening? Maybe they're in shops and things like that to avoid that, because I'm sure there's some guys that don't even realize they're doing it, right?
Truly. Yeah. So some of them, I'm sure have good intentions, but when a woman walks into the fly shop, and I think this has gotten less and less, but I still hear it happening. It's like, don't assume that the woman's there because the guy had her there, or
Oh,
that if
right,
she is
with the
with
guy.
a guy that she's not going to understand what you're talking about, because sometimes she might know more than the guy. Maybe she brought the guy in.
Right.
And so, and I think one of the best means is just to make the assumption that she knows what she's talking about, because we figure out, when we're talking. So I worked in Wolf Creek Angler for a couple of seasons, just part time. And whenever anyone came in through the door, it was just, at least greet them and be like, hey, can I help you find something? What are you looking for? And if it's in the latter part of the day, hey, how was your day? Were you on the river? I think that's a great way to start. Were you on the river? And I think that opens up the opportunity to have a great conversation and create that relationship. And I think women are looking for those relationships. We're just a little bit more nurturing, and we
Yeah.
we want that. That's just,
Right. That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah. So that's the best way. Instead of just assuming, yeah, you start from, the basics, just come in and say, hey, yeah, were you on the river today? Which is a question you could ask anybody. Just a good startup question.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I'm always like, am okay in admitting, yeah, I was on the river today and I didn't do really well,
Yeah.
and then you can jump in and be like, oh, did you try this? And I think, in the morning, it's like, hey, where are you headed? Are you headed out to the river, or, where are you headed? And that gets it going too.
Gotcha. That's it. Okay.
Just easy, right?
Yeah, it is easy. No, it should be. That's the cool thing. It should be easy.
Yeah.
And so maybe describe a little more of your clinics or your kind of 101 when you're getting folks going. So is the casting, is that always the first biggest hurdle for people that are brand new to it?
It's all a hurdle, right?
Yeah,
One of the things that
right.
I tell women about, halfway through the day or three-quarters through the day is like, okay, you guys, don't stress out. You are being fed a fire hose of information. New terms, like, when do we use the term tippet in everyday vernacular? Right?
Right. Never. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And loop to loop connection, the fly line. And so, just reassuring them that it's overwhelming, I think, is a thing. And so,
Right.
yeah. And every clinic that I do, the entomology, the kicking up bugs in the stream, just blows their minds and gets them going. And I think that's what is really important with these clinics is the hands-on, getting out and doing it.
Right.
And I'm blessed where Wolf Creek Angler, the owner, Jason Orzakowski, has been a ardent supporter of me launching Last Chance Fly Gals and getting, being welcoming of women coming into a shop and showing up for women's functions when we would have them, where, as anyone could attend. And that's still the case today, but, it's the women that show up. But being blessed that I can host my clinics in his shop. And so we have the little prickly pear that runs right by the shop. And so we've got the opportunity to do a bug seine right there, and then walk into the shop with our samples
Oh, wow.
in one bowl. Yeah. And we get a chance to really look at them under the, good lighting, and then look at his fly bins. And, it's like, sometimes you've got to have some imagination as to what you see in this bowl of live insects and what you see in the fly bins as to what you would fish. And so then that's an opportunity to point out that fly shops are a great resource for, cluing you in on what flies are actually working, and, just relying on them and trusting them, and because they want
Yeah,
you to
that's a
come
good
back.
connection.
They want you to have
Right.
success, right?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. It sounds like Jason's a cool guy. I mean, and it makes sense for him. I mean, obviously he's letting you use the shop for women, and then there's going to be a back and forth because now they've got a connection to a local fly shop. And
Exactly.
right, so it makes total
Exactly.
sense. And the women and the women in fly fishing, this has come up a few times. We've talked about the 50-50 kind of Orvis movement and stuff, but I think that's maybe not the most important thing, the number, but just about getting more women out there. What's your take on where we're at? Do you feel like, are you seeing a lot more women that are coming into it out there than there were, say, 10 years ago?
100%. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, well, and even admittedly, at least around here. So I guess it is 10 years ago, 2014. Wow. Yeah. When I started floating the river with my friend Matt, I was the only woman out there. And now, given, some days it was a weekday, because at the time I had flexibility. I owned the businesses and could just be like, okay, you guys are in charge. I'm going fishing, which is pretty
Mm-hmm.
amazing. But yeah, I didn't see hardly any other women. There were at the time, there still are, they are still there, two female guides that were out there, and was introduced to them. But outside of them, it was extremely rare that I saw another woman. And that's what intrigued me about the idea of potentially starting a women's group here in town, because I was seeing United Women on the Fly just getting going. Social media was becoming a bigger thing. And now, let's say on a typical guide day, I will see about 20% of the boats, at least, if not 30%, have women in them as clients. The one thing that I've still yet to see, and I'm looking forward to when that changes, is a boat full of women, a woman
Right.
rower with
Oh,
two
yeah.
female anglers, or, something of that nature, or a male and a female.
Yeah.
Just having fun, not necessarily guiding, but a girl getting out there, rowing her own boat, or, a family boat. She's, rowing at times. That, I think, is when we'll be like, okay, we've really made some inroads here.
That's
So,
it. That's
yeah.
totally it. Yeah. We're working. We were talking about that on our trip. I was, doing most of the rowing, but we kind of took turns. But I think for Megan, I think what I'm going to do is just get a raft, get another boat, and have
Oh,
and have her take it down. And so, and the cool thing about that is that we're doing our long trips. We can split the gear, so
oh.
she'll have half the gear and a kid. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then it'll make it easier for me. But no, the cool thing is that she'll learn to row. And I think a raft. The cool thing about the rivers we're on, there's a little more white water, so a raft is kind of
Oh,
nice. You can
sure.
make some mistakes, and so we're gonna be working on that this next year. But no, that makes so sense. What other tips would you give somebody listening now who either is female or maybe a guy that wants to help to get his partner into fly fishing or knows some women that what would you tell them? Where do they get started? Is the first thing to find a group like yours and join that, or where do they go?
I think, yeah, I think that if there is locally a group to join, a women's group, by all means, they're typically, the members are getting out for fishing excursions. And even if you're new, just being around it, meeting other women who are willing to, in essence, hold your hand and kind of help you through it. Typically, ideally, they're putting on, naughty nights where you go meet at a brewery and tie
Mm-hmm.
knots. Or, yeah, we're having a presentation. I remember one of our first things that we did as Last Chance Fly Gals was I had a fellow female guide from Missoula come over and talk about the double nymph rig. And just, you know, as an experienced angler, you're like, oh, that's easy peasy. I'm just gonna, whip that out. And I remember the challenge. I saw what my friend Matt had set up for as a double nymph rig for me to fish, and then we'd clip it off so I could take my rod home. It took me probably another several months to a year to, finally figure out how to tie it myself. And so
Right.
just, yeah, starting with those classes and fly shops, a lot of the fly shops I think are offering opportunities for education. At least I hope that they are. And quite frankly, there is anymore now a ton of material on YouTube. But the challenge is you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
need some kind of guidance as to where to start. And I think United Women on the Fly puts out a lot of good material. And so those social media groups, you'll see some really good questions by new anglers that other people are like, oh, I was wondering the same thing. And so we are surrounded by a lot of educational materials. But at the end of the day, I think it's so key to be able to do it with somebody else.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's a ton of information out there. Like even, right, I think we try to focus on education. Obviously, this is education, but there's a lot, and it seems like it's overwhelming. And that's why having the group or some place where people can, implement it, like get on the water, like you said, the naughty nights, tying, and having a beer. That's why that's so critical. What about the person who maybe isn't as comfortable even with the women's group? Like maybe they don't, is there another way? What else would you recommend? Is that maybe just get a guide and start it?
Yeah, I highly encourage. Yeah, if you've got the financial means to do so, get a guide. And for instance, I offer one-on-one instruction for walk wading, but I also offer the opportunity to bump it up to a total of 4 or 5 people. And I start with a base price and then add, $100 per additional person. And so then they can actually split that cost amongst a group. And you just, the bigger you get, it's going to be a little bit less intense instruction, but you're still going to get some good on water instruction. One other means, and it's something that I've been doing the last 2 years, is look at your adult ed offerings. I teach what I call fundamentals of fly fishing. It's a 6-evening course over 3 weeks. So it's 2 nights a week that I do at the adult ed, or I'm sorry, at the Helena College here in town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I've seen, an array of people, some who have their own rods and people who don't, and they're just curious about fly fishing. They're willing to spend, I think they charge $130 for the class.
Sure. Yeah.
And they show up and they keep showing up. Like,
That's
I'm
what you want, though.
impressed.
You want, I think
Yes.
there's something about having some skin in the game. That's why charging some money is actually helpful because it keeps, if you don't charge anything that's free, there's no reason. It's like, well,
To
why
continue,
do I need to go?
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But it's like you got some skin in the game. So that's cool. So you do a fundamentals, and in that fundamentals, is it all class-based where you walk through PowerPoints?
Yeah, it is. It's all class-based because once you start guiding on the river, you have to involve your outfitter. And this is a means for me to, get people like at least that introduction to fly fishing to then maybe commit to buying maybe a rod reel combo and getting me for a day on the water, whether it's in the boat or some walk wade type instruction.
Yep. Nice. That's really cool. So I'd love to hear more about that. I mean, I guess in the fundamentals, is it maybe talk just high level how you break that down? What do the sessions look like? How do you start that off?
Yeah. So the first evening is just talking about your rod and your reel and the line and tippet.
Yep.
And then we do knots at the end of that session.
Mm-hmm.
And then second session is entomology. So I love entomology. And so I, over the years, I've taken photos of what I've found in creeks and rivers and have a great slide presentation with some diagrams of, that evolution of an aquatic insect. And then the third is casting. And then we talk about locally places to fish. And I like to just illustrate, we're right here in Helena, we are surrounded by an amazing array of water, whether it's still water, small creeks, or of course the Missouri River. And then we do rigging. And we talk about, so they've seen the bugs, they've learned their knots. So we do a knot refresher for the next evening. And then we tie together a double nymph rig, a dry dropper, etc. And we talk, just kind of some fish behavior. And then another casting evening. And we'll talk about, stream access and fish ID. So, yeah, it's a broad brush.
Yeah, it's high level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So but you get into all of it, and then they can take that to decide whether they're into it and ready for the next step, or maybe not. That's kind of
exactly.
Who were we've had a number of women on the podcast. I mean, most recently we worked with Jerry Meyer out in the Driftless
Oh,
area, and
I love Jerry.
she's awesome. It was awesome to meet her in person because we were at
Oh, yes.
we were with Jason Randall at his cabin there, which is on this amazing spring creek, right out the back. But Jerry, we were hanging out there, and she's just, she's amazing. And I can't wait to do more with her. But who are some of the, women that maybe helped you, similarly, that were kind of those bigger than life people? Were there any out there along the way?
Yeah. And so I had the fortune to meet Heather Hodson early on as she was getting United Women on the Fly, going, and she had it going. And I reached out to her to see if she had any advice for me, when I started Last Chance Fly Gals here in Helena. So that was a really great connection, and still run into her here and there. And then Kelly Harrison, she was a guide in Missoula, and just really go-getter. She would fish both, the Blackfoot, or guide the Blackfoot, the Clark Fork, and the Missouri. And she was, we brought her in to do one of our clinics for Last Chance Fly Gals. And then, oh my gosh, numerous women, Mia Shepard. Yeah.
Oh, right.
I took a bass trip with her.
Oh, cool.
On the John Day.
On the John Day, right.
Yeah.
God, that must have been cool.
It was awesome. Yeah. And, in these trips, there's a lot of female trips out there, and I will just jump at any opportunity, when I can afford it, to do it. One, to see new area, meet women, get that networking in, just made a lot of connections through Fly Fishers International. They've got what's called Women Connect, and was actually over in the Driftless, I think 2 falls ago, and met Jerry on that trip.
Cool.
Yeah. Along with some other Wisconsin and Minnesotans. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so just getting this broad, unique network of women that everyone, we're all doing our thing in our local area and doing it well. And so there's countless women that
was really cool. I guess, where we're at, we're going to start to take it out of here in a little bit, but anything high level, we're not going deep on, I think we're providing some good resources for people to get into, but, somebody's listening now, they're new to it, or they want to help somebody get into it. What else would you be telling them?
Oh, what would I be telling them? Well, listen to Wet Fly Swing podcast.
Right.
Truly. That was one thing. I'm actually new to listening to podcasts about fishing, probably about a year ago. And I call that new. I didn't realize that there was, so much material being presented by way of a podcast.
Yeah.
And, and maybe Dave, maybe it's, where I'm at in my journey of, what I know, that I'm taking great interest in the material and thoroughly enjoy listening to podcasts about fly fishing, but I do.
I know.
And, and I don't know, I have to wonder if for a new angler, if it would be of interest, or, is it over their head? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah. That's always the struggle with the podcast a little bit. And that's why I think doing these types of episodes, the podcast is a little unique because, some of the best podcasts are just conversations. They're not necessarily just, we're drilling into tips. And that's why we're trying to, with the School of Fishing, the other, business I have, where we're trying to really focus on more of that, just that step by step. We're bringing on people to do presentations, and that's where we're
fun.
So that's kind of where. But again, I think the podcast is great because you get a lot of the tips and tricks, but then you just hear the stories. And I hear from, a lot of the episodes we hear about are more the stories. I think like this one is going to resonate with women who listen. They're like, oh, right, that resonates with me, right? Not just like how to tie a dropper, which is important, right?
Right. Well, and I think one of the things that I tell any of my students, and it's something that I thoroughly enjoy myself, is that regardless of where you are at in your journey and your knowledge, just getting out, regardless that you don't know how to tie on that double nymph rig, but maybe you can tie on that dry fly. And even if it's fall, which is great dry fly fishing, get out and do it, because you're going to learn something. And by getting out and doing it, you're practicing in essence, which is great. You get to practice while you fish. you are supposed to practice your casts on that football
Yeah,
field. And yeah, we
sure.
cast differently when we're practicing versus when we're fishing. But just getting out and overcoming that fear of not knowing what you're doing out there is huge. I get that, but do it. And you're going to continue having aha moments. One of the things that I like to see happen is when I'm instructing casting is that I'll start hearing my students correct their own casting, or they'll diagnose what happened.
Right.
Oh, I didn't pause long enough on that back cast, or whatever the case may be. And so by getting out and doing it, you are going to learn and you're going to enjoy it. Ideally,
Mm-hmm.
there are times
Yeah.
you don't. We've all had
No.
those times.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I
Just
think
do it.
that would be my one piece of advice, Dave, is regardless of how little or how much you know, just get out and do it.
Love it. Love it. No,
Yeah.
I think that's the best tip for sure because yeah, you can sit there and, analyze everything and try to make it perfect and it's never going to be perfect, but getting out is what it's all about. And even if you don't catch a fish or have a struggle, but you're still going to be outdoors, you're still going to be learning, and you never know. That's the cool thing about fishing is you never know. I mean, every trip, could be that one fish that you just hook. Maybe it's your first fish, maybe it's your biggest fish, but it could happen right today. Today could be the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you never know what you're going to find out there. And if you're not fishing, you're not going to see those places that you would otherwise.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's start to take it out of here. We got a segment we try to always do. I've called it different things over the years. We've called it the rapid fire, but today I think we're just going to call it our kind of our shout out to Helena because
Yes.
this episode is presented by Helena. Visit Helena, Montana, and we've done some cool things. Like I said, we got some good stuff coming up here. I can't wait to get on the river and visit some of the fly shops around there and do some more stuff. But just on a high level, let's start there with Helena. What is it about? How do you somebody who hasn't been to Helena, how do you describe the town?
Oh, it is a through and through mountain town. We are nestled right in the mountains. We've got an amazing array of trails. We've got a little ski area that's just outside of town by 30 minutes. An amazing array of water. As I mentioned, still water, little streams, the big river, the Missouri River, of course, the Blackfoot's not far away. And then we've got a beautiful downtown, very historic downtown, beautiful buildings, lovely stores, great restaurants, lots of breweries.
Yeah, there is. There's lots of breweries. That's a good thing, right? There's lots of breweries. And
Yeah.
what's one? Do you have? I mean, you're in the industry too. So do you have a take on some of the? Are they all good? Is there a mix of different types out there of breweries and kind of coffee shops?
Yeah, fortunately, they are all good and each has its unique identity. And for as small as Helena is, we support them all,
Yeah,
whether
yeah,
that's
you
good or
support them all.
bad. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would be? And so you mentioned you had a taco shop and a coffee shop. Were those the two
Yeah.
restaurants?
Yep. So in 2004 I had started a Taco del Sol, which is a Montana franchise, and I was the second store.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then in 2013 I'd bought Hub Coffee and it kept it going. Both are downtown, right on Last
Oh, they're
Chance
both.
Gulch.
So they're both still out there, still downtown.
They are. Yeah, they made
Yeah.
it through COVID. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, if we were coming through there and maybe a day on the water and we're hitting a restaurant, where other than Taco del Sol, where would you recommend that would be a good place to stop by?
Yeah, on Broadway, and you'll see a few anglers in there. On Broadway is actually the place that I worked as a server during COVID,
Okay.
and it's good dining. You can still walk in with your ball cap and your fishing shirt on and feel just as comfortable as the other, more nicely dressed people around you.
Right.
But yeah, you'll see
Yeah.
outfitters taking their clients
Yeah.
to dinner there.
It's pretty casual.
Good scratch made food. It's Italian. It's got steaks, homemade pasta, good wine, excellent cocktails. I mean,
Wow.
it's the place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds right. So we got on Broadway, and then you mentioned mountain biking and hiking. What are some other activities that people are doing other than that in town?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, you said skiing. I mean, is it mostly it's outdoor? I mean, obviously you're in Montana. Those are the big things. People are doing things outdoor, whether that's hunting, fishing, all the above.
Yeah, absolutely. And then ice hockey can be a thing. We've got
Mm.
a team here. I don't know what you would call them. They're not pro, but they might be
Yeah,
semi-pro.
like
Yeah.
minor league
Yeah,
or something
maybe.
like that.
That's
Yeah,
beyond my comprehension.
yeah.
We've got I think the same with our baseball. We've got a
Oh,
minor.
you do?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then, yeah, running. I mean, the whole,
Uh-huh.
like you said,
Trail
anything
running.
outdoors. Yes. Trail
Yeah,
running. Yeah.
yeah. All that stuff.
Ice fishing.
What are the towns that are around other than Helena? What are the other closer towns in Montana that people would know of?
Yeah. So Missoula's an hour and a half
Missoula.
away.
Yeah.
Same with Bozeman. So
Bozeman.
Helena's kind of like, yeah, it's just equidistance between those two in essence. And then Great Falls is a
Up
little
north.
over an hour away.
Yeah.
And then Butte, everyone
And
knows Butte.
Butte.
It's an
Yeah.
hour away. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're kind of like just in the middle of all of those.
That's cool. Yeah, it is interesting because we went through there. I've never. This was the first time I drove through Montana. I mean, it's a full day. You pretty much plan on a day to get through Montana.
Yeah, at a minimum.
You know what I mean? Something like right. Yeah, if you're just getting through, you hope that you have more. But we were kind of driving through to get over. But yeah, it's awesome. There's so many rivers, so many places to stick around and camp. I guess that's the other thing are there options for lots of camping on if you're fishing the Missouri or up in that area?
Oh, yeah, there is. So some of the fishing access sites have some camping. And then, like on the lakes, we've got a lot of various campgrounds that are actually really nice. You've got boat docks at some of them. Like we're living large around
Wow.
these parts for camping.
Do you see? I mean, that's always. I mean, we've talked about this. Stillwater. I've always loved stillwater fishing. I think it's growing in fly fishing. Are there a lot of stillwater opportunities there?
There are, yeah. And so we've got Canyon Ferry Reservoir, we've got Canyon Ferry Lake, we've got Hauser Lake, Holter Lake, and then we've got some smaller ones like right here in town. We've got a little Spring Meadow Lake, it's a state park. And then, not too far away, we've got additional opportunities. And that was the reason that I went to Phil's Stillwater School just, 2 weeks ago was I want to learn more tactics. I'm working on getting my captain's license and I have a jet boat. And so eventually I want to be able to guide Stillwater.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we've got a huge array of water and
Yeah.
it's big. And so I have to learn how to fish that.
Yeah. And it's big. So you need a big boat.
Exactly.
Wow. Phil, I think he's got obviously like a lot of us. You get into it, you get a bunch of boats, but you don't have to have a big boat, right, to get in Stillwater. You can use a float tube.
Yeah. In fact, I think a lot of your listeners are familiar with Gates of the Mountains or what's called Land of Giants. And like people are launching their drift boats with an electric motor. I originally launched my drift boat there and just rode around because you can just stay in the lake and catch good fish. And we do see, kick boaters and those paddle boards now with the raised seat, the fishing setup.
Oh yeah, the fishing, right?
Kayakers, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see all that on the Missouri? What is a typical day on the Missouri? Are you finding a mix of species? Maybe talk about that real quick. What are the species you're catching there on the Missouri?
Yeah, so primarily, well, in the spring, primarily you're catching whitefish. At least that was the case this year. Yeah.
Really?
Lots of whitefish. But then for whatever reason, it's not that they die. It's just that their catch rate wanes. And we then primarily there's rainbows. And then there are nice browns on the Missouri. They're just fewer in numbers than the rainbows. And now twice now, last year and this year, I've had a client catch a kokanee. Those have come over the dam.
Right. Because it's a tailwater.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we are seeing more walleye in there and pike.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's right now the pike sightings and catches are sporadic, but the concern is, of course, that will increase.
Because of warming water.
Yeah, just in general. And then here and there we'll catch a cutthroat or a cutbow. Very rarely, but it'll happen.
Okay. One other question I think about, this has come up a few times too. It's like the kind of total, changing directions, but the women and bikini sort of stuff. I talk about this with Megan sometimes. She feels like she sees tons of that stuff out there. I feel like I don't see as much of it. What's your take on that? Do you think, the thing is, right, some woman wears a bikini and holds a fish and she does that on Instagram to get follows. What's your take? Do you see a lot of that out there?
We don't see a lot of it out here on the river. I mean, the one thing that we do see is a lot of float, your wreck floaters
Oh,
on
right.
inner
Sure.
tubes and whatnot, but they're still not like, for the most part, running around in a bikini.
Right.
Yeah, and if the girl is comfortable in her bikini, by all means,
It's
go
fine.
get it. I'm not. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
no one would want to see me in a bikini.
So you're good with, you think, I mean, like if they're out there trying to do that to get more follows, more power to them sort of thing?
I mean, yeah, kind of. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not into the whole influencer scene. I think
Right.
it's a bit like, oh,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Now, given Dave, I'm just all about fishing, and so I'm
Yeah.
like, well,
You're not, that's not even on your mind, really.
no, it's
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, where's my next fish?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
That's
I don't
it.
waste too
Yeah.
much time thinking about that.
That's awesome. No, I mean, that's good to hear because I feel like I don't think about that either, but I feel like there are guys that I guess there's plenty of guys out there that are following that stuff, for that reason.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, but I know that is a struggle for some women because, it's out there. It's part of it. And some people have a
Yeah.
hard time with it.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, we don't want it minimizing, our passion for angling.
Yeah.
Yes, I get it. Sex sells, and there
Right.
are some hot girls out there, and there's some very nice fish, and so
Right.
that combo, hell yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my main concern is, don't just minimize us to boobs and a butt.
Right. I know.
There are great anglers out there that are female and
Yeah.
just as passionate about men, or
Yeah.
just as passionate as men are
As men,
about
exactly.
angling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm good. We touched on that really quick. So I guess, yeah, before we jump out of here, anything around Helena or fly fishing or getting started or women in fly fishing you want to touch on, make sure we don't miss before we head out.
All I can say is that I am just absolutely thrilled that women are feeling more and more comfortable about pursuing fly angling, which is still male dominated, and it is intimidating.
Yeah.
But the more women that are out there, it just grows. The more
Yeah.
women that are out there, the more that women see that women are out there. And yeah, and I feel blessed that this is my journey, that I get to ease women into it and, see them pursue this journey and have some pure joy about it. It's pretty incredible.
Wow. That is incredible. Yeah, I think, and yeah, I just want to say thanks to you for doing the good work out there because, I always go back to my two girls and, and Megan, but just, because they're going to be coming up through this and they need more women out there, just like you're saying, to be doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And then they see it and they're like, oh, okay. Instead of being stuck on their devices, they can see like outdoors is still a thing, and they're like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah. Well, and vice versa, Dave. Like, kudos to you for, thinking about it and just waiting for that opportunity to, let them experience it and not, forcing them into it, but not also ignoring the fact that they might be interested in it.
Right. Yeah. Thinking, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the whole thing. I remember before I had kids, I was always like, oh man, it's going to be great to have my first boy, and then as soon as my first daughter was born, I was like, man, that went out the window so fast. I was like, this is just as amazing as, what I mean? And it has been really cool because I grew up around a family of boys. I had 3 brothers. And so it was all boys. And so now I'm in all women. It's pretty cool, right? And we, so I love the way this has kind of come here in full circle. But cool. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today. We'll definitely be in touch, obviously moving ahead, and we'll be sending women and other folks out your way. And like I said, we're going to be heading out that way. So hopefully we can, meet up in person, all that too. Remind us again where we can send everybody if they have questions or if they want to connect with one of your clinics or one of your everything you have going.
Yeah. So specific questions, they're welcome to email me at flyfisheradventures@gmail.com. And then Shalon Hastings, if you search for me on Instagram, you'll be able to find me. And Shalon is somewhat of a unique name, and so there's not many of us out there.
That's right. Yeah, Shalon. That is a good name. Yeah, that's where's the? I usually don't ask much about the names, but I was recently listening. Well, I guess I was listening to our podcast in our network, the In the Bucket, and Brian was. They're talking about names. But what is that? That is a cool name. Where does that come from?
So my dad made it up. He had misheard the word shalom and mispronounced it, actually. And then for whatever reason, I ended up with it as my name. And I enjoy being Shalon.
And what does shalom mean? Shalom is greetings,
think peace in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably greetings or peace in Hebrew. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, perfect. All right, Shalon, we'll leave it there for now. And thanks again for all your time and all the good work out there, and looking forward to keeping in touch with you.
Yes, I would love the opportunity to meet you in person when you come to Helena. Thank you.
Booyah! I haven't had a good booyah yet, so had to get a booyah with me. Booyah! If you know someone new to fly fishing, or if you are new to fly fishing, you should check in with Shalon right now. Pick her brain a bit. Especially if you're out in the area, that part of Montana, check in and see what she has going with her program this year. And I know she would love to hear from you. If you get a chance, please follow this show. That's one way to support the podcast. So one other way to support is check out the shop. This is wetflyswing.com/pro. We've launched this. We're taking it slow right now. We've got some members in there, but we're just back now and getting rolling here. So if you're interested in finding out more about the value here, one of the big things you get is a community to build trips with together. And we got some other good stuff going. So check it out right now, wetflyswing.com/pro. I want to mention before we get out of here, we're doing a big trip with Landon Mayer. This is our Trout School West. You can go to wetflyswing.com/troutwest. Trout West will get you there, and you can find out what we have going. We've got a few spots that are available, and one of the great ones, Landon Mayer, he's going to take us into fishing trout. He's got some signature flies and all that, but this is going to be an exceptionally big trip, so check it out now. All right, I got to get off to the next one. I've got some big ones coming up around the corner. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. I appreciate you for stopping in today. Hope you have a great morning. Hope you have a fabulous afternoon or an amazing evening wherever you are in the world, and I appreciate you for spending time with us today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.